Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you a number of ideas for opening activities. Opening activities are the activities that we do before we begin our main lesson. We do follow a Waldorf approach, but I think opening activities can work with any kind of homeschooling approach or philosophy. So for our opening activities, we usually try to do this for about 30 minutes or less. It is a way to invite children into a learning space, especially if they're doing something more interesting than academics. And we tend to have something that's enjoyable for our opening activities, something that's engaging, reading a book, doing some movement math, or playing a game, something that can be of interest for the children, that pique their interest, that invite them into a learning space and transition them from something that they're currently doing to something that you want them to do so that you can guide them further into your academic lesson for the day. Handwork is a great opening activity as long as you are keeping in mind the purpose of an opening activity and the purpose of handwork that's separate from your opening activity. So what I mean by that is that there are handwork projects that are intended for each grade level, and some of those projects do take quite a bit of time. Some of them are a little bit shorter, and what I love about our opening activities is that we can include some handwork from a project that we've already started, that it gives us that moment before we're ready to engage in some lessons that we can do a little bit of handwork, or we can do handwork while the other person is, say, reading aloud. So either my daughter will work on handwork while I'm reading aloud, or vice versa. Sometimes she's now 13, so sometimes she wants to read aloud and I'll work on a little bit of handwork. So I have mostly here some things that I think would work really well for younger students who are maybe not ready for some of the handwork projects. And then I also have things that are actually intended for older students. So the first thing I want to share with you is this very, very simple, it maybe looks not as simple, but it actually really is. Pumpkin. And the way that you knit, you just have to knit. There's no extra things. You do need to cast on and bind off, but there's nothing extra in order to do this. And what's great is that the pattern's super easy. You're just doing a rectangle. That's it. And then you are pulling the rectangle at the top and the bottom and the sides together in order to get this shape. Very easy. And then this little top part for the stem, we use the knitting tower. So here's something that multiple kids can work on one project together, or the child can work on the project by themselves if they are able to knit. Because if you're using a knitting tower, you don't need to know how to knit yet. So this is a knitting tower. It's by Camden Rose. And I think I might have other things by this vendor, but you can use any kind of yarn, really simple. And there are two sides to it depending on how complicated you want to do your knitting tower. And it comes with the instructions, which is really great because I always need to refer to the instructions when we're first starting out. I always forget how to start out. Once you get started, it's quite repetitive. It's really easy. And over time, you'll just see the work that you're working on come from the bottom. And that's what this is. And then we just sewed it onto our pumpkin. So this would be really great for younger students who are looking to do some handwork before they're ready for knitting. Here's another handwork project that you could do, again, for younger students. And this is another tool that you can use for some very simple I wouldn't call it knitting exactly, like maybe cording is maybe a better way to describe what you would be doing with this one. And it also has the instructions, which is really great. And if you want to do some knitting, you can also make your own knitting needles, which is a grade 1 project. And then you can begin with some simple knitting. I find that the bulky yarn is great for beginners. And then this one is actually plant dyed, so it's even a little bit, I find it a little bit more fancy than some of the typical yarns that you're going to find. The colors are also more muted when you find plant dyed yarn, and I know that some Waldorf teachers, especially in grade 1, would want more of the pure colors, and so that I'm going to leave that up to you on the pros and cons of those, but I did want to show you some of the materials that we're using for our handwork, specifically for opening activities. If you want handwork for the grades, that's a different approach, but I do find that you may need time to work on your projects outside of the designated time that you have for your handwork projects. So Wool Pets, this is a kit that comes with everything you need in order to make these darling little wool pets, except for the foam mat. So if you don't have a foam mat, I think you could maybe even use like a little old pillow that you might have, or just something, because as you're piercing your wool, you don't want to damage your needle by hitting something hard. So these are little projects that you can do. This is our little penguin that we made, and it comes with all of the wool that you need. It also comes with the needle. Now the needle is very, very sharp, and that's why I would advise this for much older children. I would say middle school and older. My children did this when they were younger, but it's not advised, in my opinion, to do this with younger children because of the nature of the art, because you're just poking that wool, and because of the very, very sharp needle, that if you just miss and you hit yourself, it may not be as damaging as, say, like poking yourself with a scissor, but it hurts and you might draw blood even. So I would definitely not advise it for younger children, and definitely not if you've got a whole group of children and you can't supervise them one-on-one. I just would not feel comfortable having them work with such a sharp needle. So this kit comes in a really cute little package. We've had this kit for many years, and I have replenished some of the wool so that we have everything if we want to do another one, but it comes with all of the instructions. And so it is, I want to say it's not complicated, but it's definitely not for young children. So as far as like being able to do this project, my children did do this when they were starting from about 9 or 10 years old. And then some of my children did it when they were even younger, but theirs turned out more flat versus more three-dimensional. So just another option for an opening activity if you want to include some handwork or something that's a little bit more hands-on. I have one more option for you. If you are looking to do some cross stitch with an older student and you're looking for something that's a little bit more diverse, this is the Tatriz kit. So this is traditional Palestinian embroidery, and this one is the sampler kit. So it's going to come with the samples of the different motifs so that you can practice these so that you can do them on your projects. So what I like about this kit is that it again comes with everything you need, which is really great. If you're new to handwork, I really advise getting kits over getting all of your materials separately, unless you feel like you're really able to follow through with your projects. I find that kits are really helpful when I'm not as familiar with a project or an art form, and this way it gives you all the materials that you're going to need rather than buying them separately, and it gives you usually some really great instructions to help you be successful in your project. So this one comes with the embroidery floss, and then the hoop, the needle, and then your fabric to embroider. So this is not actually fabric. This is cross stitch fabric specifically so that you can do your cross stitch. And then there are different methods of how you can include this into your onto your clothing. So I've seen a couple of different ways that you can do this. I've seen ways where you use this fabric itself, the cross stitch fabric, and then you line it so your entire fabric is covered in cross stitch, and then you can line it and, like, say, make a little zipper bag for your pencils. And then there's another way where you have this onto your clothes, like onto the garment that you want to include embroidery, and you do the embroidery, and then you pull each of these threads out, the thread of the embroidery cloth out. So I'm very, very new to embroidery, so I really appreciate a kit like this, and I've only done a few different things, not very much, and so having something like this would make it more successful for us if we're trying to introduce this in our homeschool, and then we could continue to practice it during our opening activities. Some students need a lot more hand projects, activities that they can just engage their whole body with or their hands with, rather than something that's a little bit more passive, like listening to a book being read aloud, or something that's more academic that really calls on their mental capacity for an opening activity. And so for those students, I have origami paper and paper for sun catchers. So this is origami paper. It comes in so many different colors. There are also books that you can buy in order to figure out how to do different shapes and animals. And what's great about this is that this is something that really engages the student with tactile with their hands, and it's something that's creative. However, it still requires a lot of effort. But because you're getting a product fairly quickly, I feel like somewhat of the dopamine hits kind of early, which allows the student to have the motivation to keep trying a project like this, which does require some practice and some skill, following direction, and in the end, you get this beautiful little origami shape that can be either just decorative or in some cases can be a little bit more than just decorative. So this is some origami paper. We also have a book on different origami projects that you can do. And then we also have the sun catchers. This one is more involved, and this is definitely not for younger students. Both the origami and the sun catchers, I would say it's best for students who have a little bit of their own ability to do this. Otherwise, you're spending a little bit too much time trying to help the students out. And sun catchers especially, because you're oftentimes having to do some intricate folds that you have to tape together in order to get the final project. Sometimes this is more of an interactive project, or maybe if you're doing this with younger students, you're say cutting all of the paper first to get cutting this into 6 pieces or 8 pieces, and then asking the student to do the more simple project, the simple part of the project, maybe just folding it in half or making the corners bent to make the triangle shape. And then you can do the more intricate parts of the star. So this is a really beautiful project because once you're done with them, you can hang them in your window. And because the paper is translucent, the light comes through and it's so beautiful. I especially like doing these in the fall or in the spring. For some reason, those are the 2 times a year that we ended up doing a lot of sun catchers. But it does involve either some parent-teacher help with the student, or it means that the student has to be a little bit older in order to do this independently, or this becomes not an opening activity, but an actual lesson. So if you've done several of these in the past and now your student wants to become proficient at whatever shape they were working on, then it works fabulously as an opening activity because they've already practiced, they've already been introduced, and now they can do this as more of an enjoyment as part of their opening activity. Same with the origami, where it's something that if they've already been exposed to it and they're really working on practicing a particular shape, or they're looking to make a shape for like all their friends, for instance, then this would make a really great opening activity. Something else that we like to start our school day with is a candle. I just have a little candle here to show you so that I remember to share with you how meaningful a very small gesture like lighting a candle or greeting your student at the front door or greeting your child as they come into their learning space is just a really nice formal habit to include that seems like it's so small and can be overlooked, but it actually is a really big, meaningful gesture for that student. So I love including candles in our homeschool. The boys loved candles. My daughter, not so much. She doesn't like fire. So we have less candles now that I'm just homeschooling my daughter. Now, when my children were younger, especially my boys, they loved these kinds of kits. And so including a kit like an excavation kit, they love them so much. Now, you can also make your own excavation kits. I believe these ones were from the dollar store. So getting a few of these and having them as part of your opening activities, fabulous. Or you can break open real geodes. This would be a little bit more of an engaging opening activity. You might need to go outside for this. This one is the kit that comes with a lot of them. I think it came with 15 of these. It's a heavy kit, big box, and it comes with your safety gear, which is so important, and then it comes with your geodes, and your geodes are a variety of geodes. So you do have some pyrite in here, as well as geodes that have very beautiful interiors. And so you do need a couple extra tools in order to break these open. And this would make a really fun opening activity, but this would be a lot more engaging, a lot more exciting. And you'll have to decide also whether doing something this exciting is right for your opening activities, because sometimes this defeats the purpose of an opening activity, and then my children are less focused than before because they've done something that was exciting. They want to explore it, they want to do more than one, and so you have to use some of these opening activities very mindfully. And the way that I would use these is if they were super engaged in something that they really loved. There are days when my children were younger, especially with the boys, where they would have play, imaginative, open-ended play that spanned days at a time. So building forts and setting up their toys and engaging in this imaginative play that was like several days long. And I'm all for that 100%. They could do that, every day of their childhood. But if there was a time that I myself really wanted them to engage in something that was learning based, that was different. So of course, open-ended play is incredibly important for their development and for their learning skills and their gross motor skills and their fine motor skills and their potential for critical thinking later on. But if I really wanted to sort of guide them into something that I had planned, this would be the thing that would be so exciting for them that they would abandon their imaginative play for a little bit and do something that I wanted them to do in preparation for something that was even more engaging from an academic perspective. Because to break that imaginative play just to run into doing math, that's just not going to happen. And I valued their open-ended play far more than I valued the academic side of their younger elementary days of learning. Like, their play was more important to me. But if there was a time that I really needed them to engage in something that was academic, this would be the thing that would excite them enough for them to leave their imaginative play for a little bit. I have a few more options that you can use for your opening activities. This is the Beeswax Honeycomb Candle Rolling Kit. And the reason why I like this so much as an opening activity is that it literally takes you 5 minutes to do this. You do want to gently warm the wax first, especially if it's a cold day. And what I love about this is that the prep time is pretty much nothing. The cleanup time also not very much. And the activity is actually fairly short. And then, of course, you can light your candle as part of your homeschool day. But the reason why I like this so much is that you get to roll a candle, which is just a few minutes with barely any prep time, versus candle dipping, which has a lot of prep time, a considerable amount of cleanup, and the process itself is pretty lengthy, and it's a little bit difficult to do with multiple children. You really have to be prepared for something like this. But as part of an opening activity, you can definitely roll candles very easily. And this kit is from A Child's Dream, so it comes with several sheets of beeswax. There's also the kit from Nature Watch, I believe, and those ones are much smaller, and it's a classroom kit, so it comes with more sheets of beeswax if you want to do this for a classroom. But this will be something that's engaging. You can use your hands, and then you can light the candle in the end. Using your hands is something that's really encouraged in Waldorf education. The tactile, the molding of clay is something that's encouraged from a young age, and it's utilized in different main lesson blocks as the children get older. So I have 3 choices for you here. Going back to beeswax, we have these beeswax pieces. There are different kinds. There's also a very thin kind as well that you can use for covering eggs and other, like wooden eggs and other decorative projects. These ones are a little bit thicker. They smell amazing. They smell like my childhood because I went to a Waldorf school for a little bit when I was very young, and this smell is the same as it was many years ago. So the only thing is that you need to hold these in your hand for quite a while until they get warm enough for you to be able to mold them. The other thing is that I had one son, I have 4 children, and one of my children loved beeswax so much, he even likes it as an adult. but he would less make objects with it and more wait till it warmed up and then take a little piece in his hand and play with that little piece, and inevitably it would end up on the floor. And we had carpet in the schoolroom, and you could tell where he was sitting because there was all this wax like embedded in the carpet. And you can get it out with a hairdryer or an iron and some like a paper bag, but for the most part it did damage our carpet. Now, if you want something that's more moldable and you can bake it and keep the items that you make, I might suggest the Sculpey Ultralight Oven Baked Clay. This one is so soft. It does get softer as it gets warmer, but it's soft right out of the bag, and it stays soft even if you don't package this up very tightly. It will stay. I've never had one get hard. And then if you do want it to be hard, you can bake it, and then once you're done baking it, you can even paint it. So we've used this clay so many times in our years of homeschool. But if they need something that's tactile and they don't have the patience to warm up some beeswax clay or beeswax, then they could use this polymer or oven baked clay. Another thing that you could do is actual clay. So this clay we've used for many of our projects. Now this clay is both more messy and in some cases harder to clean up, in some cases easier to clean up. So this clay is, some pieces have gotten a little bit hard, but what's really great is that all you have to do is soak it in water and it will become soft again. So the reason why sometimes I like clay, and it needs to be a little bit softer, and this is dried out a little bit more, but one of the reasons why I like actual clay over beeswax is that even if this falls on the ground, and yes, this is like clay, or you can imagine it like dirt, you can clean it and vacuum it out of your carpet. And we did have dark carpet, so maybe that's why I don't mind this so much. But once it dries, you can vacuum it out, and it doesn't usually damage the carpet the way that the beeswax would damage the carpet. So that was one thing that I wasn't so bothered if they're going to actually use clay. This is quite dry, so you don't see it on my hand. But if it is at the right moisture level, it will get all over your hands, all over your desk, all over your clothes if you're not careful. And so it might be that one of these other options is a better option for you if you don't want the mess of actual clay. Another idea for opening activities is some form drawing. I have several form drawing books, but I wanted to share with you creative form drawing for the 4 temperaments. This is a little bit different. Now we're looking at the temperaments. And what I like about this is workbook 3, so it's for ages 6 to 12. And what I like about this book, number one, the color is beautiful. The illustrations are fabulous. And the additional content on how to do this is so informative, especially if you've never done form drawing before. Now, I've done form drawing with my students, and I'm also learning form drawing as an adult as I'm going through a version of Waldorf teacher training. It's not technically a Waldorf teacher training, but I'm going through a teacher process where I'm acting as the student learning the form drawing, and it's been fabulous. And so including a book like this means that you as a teacher might have to become accustomed to it before you're presenting this to your students, but spending a little bit of time in form drawing before you start your lesson could be very good for your students, or it could be very draining for your students. So you really have to judge whether this is a suitable opening activity depending on your student and their level of engagement and concentration and how tired they are by doing this process. I personally really love it, and it's not necessarily a tiresome process for me, but there are some students that find it really tiresome. So just be aware that if this is not working out for you for the purposes of your opening activity, it might be that it's too engaging of a process for your student, or maybe some of the forms might be a little bit too complicated because it does take quite a bit of thought process and a lot of your will forces to do something like this for some students. And so you may have to pull back from the complexity, or you might just have to keep this as part of your main lesson, or you might just choose just to do one very short form drawing and then move on to another opening activity. I hope you enjoy this look at our opening activities ideas. I hope that you'll check out the blog post that accompanies this video that has all of the details for these different categories of opening activity ideas, as well as links to all of the resources that I shared with you today. You could find the link to that blog post in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're doing our opening activities on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.